Rob Tebbutt here for ID Boxing. Delighted to be joined by Eddie Hearn. We're in the deep, dark depths of Westfield in Shepherd's Bush, Eddie. I thought somebody must have got the wrong Westfield today.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice. Long way from the O2. AJ is staying out around this neck of the woods, so probably had partly to do with it. But I missed you at the press conference, and I wanted to give you your own time here, as I didn't want you to feel it was personal. So you don't get a stand up for 2 minutes, you have a sit down. So congratulations.
Thanks very much, Eddie. You've blessed me
And that
with
means
your
a lot
time.
to you, doesn't it?
It does mean a lot to me, yeah. I know you had to go and eat, though, and I know that means a lot to you now.
Yeah,
with
well,
your
it
training
was
and...
more than eating, but, you know.
Okay. Well, how are you, Ed?
I'm good. I'm really good, actually. It's been an explosion in the last 7 days on this fight, to be honest with you. Like, it's always a big fight. Tickets are sold out now, but it took longer than I expected. But the last week, the interest, the media coverage, obviously the momentum of being on the Sky platform, the Sky homepages, now in pubs and clubs and stuff like that, the numbers are looking fantastic, and got everything crossed really for a successful night in that respect for DAZN, but most importantly a successful night for Anthony. And a lot riding on the fight. I think people are starting to realise how much rides on the fight. You know, you make the fight, it should come through that quite, Jermaine speaking very well, quite confident. And I think we'll see a lot when that bell goes about where Anthony's at mentally, physically, and in his career.
You just mentioned there, let's dive straight into kind of the broadcast side of things with DAZN and all of the developments lately, now being available on Sky Channel 429. You're always pretty open when it comes to viewership and things like that. What are you expecting, what are you hoping for this weekend?
I think it helps a lot. I mean, the whole strategy and mindset for streaming is not necessarily to sit on Sky platforms, but we also understand that the way that fight fans consume and have consumed fight content over the last few years has been by that method. So I think it's a big win for us. It also fights back the argument among fighters of, but it's an app and they're not on Sky. Well, we are on Sky. It's more accessible now. We expect that, Saturday is such a huge night for DAZN because they could add 300,000 or 400,000 subscribers to their subscriber base, which puts them in an unbelievable position. Then, as we've seen in America, you need to keep creating those key moments, but keep the foundations of the schedule solid so that when we get from April the 1st to May the 1st, you've got Canelo against John Ryder, you've got Katie Taylor against Chantel Cameron, you've got our May 27th show, which we'll announce tomorrow, etc. So you have to work harder to have a schedule up and running well in advance. Do you know what I mean? And that's the most difficult thing in boxing, is to be able to say what's coming in June or July, because the incentive needs to be there for the subscriber to say, okay, I'll sign up for the annual pass or I'll commit to 12 months. But how do I know? Well, we've had a great start, but we must maintain that over the coming months.
Got a number?
Sorry?
Number for what you're expecting this weekend, viewership-wise?
Viewership. I expect to add 300,000 or 400,000 subscribers to the customer base. So that'll give you an example. I think we should be looking at beyond 500,000 watching this fight. But I don't know. Not pay-per-view, so that's great incentive. Obviously, different packages to understand and to consider. But that's away from the pubs, obviously, as well. But it's put it this way. 3 weeks ago, before this was in place, to not have it on the Sky platform, Virgin Box, in pubs, is a very different picture. So we're really happy with where we are coming into this fight tomorrow.
Just mentioned there about May 27th, Mauricio Lara versus Lara-Wood rematch.
Mauricio Lara versus Lara-Wood or Josh Warrington, and likely Lara-Wood, because he's got an opportunity to wait. He ain't really interested in waiting. He believed that he was winning the fight. He was winning the fight, and he believed he made a mistake, and he believes he can beat him. So the winner of that fight would fight whoever doesn't take that fight. But at the same time, Lara-Wood is quite adamant that he wants his second shot at Mauricio Lara.
Back to Anthony-Joshua. Where does he go with a win this weekend? Where does he go with a loss?
I think with a win, depending on the fashion, puts him in a great position.
Does it have to be in good fashion?
I'll take the win. But I think people are saying, he needs to go out there and do this and do that. And if it is devastating, I think it puts him in a great position for the Fury fight. What I'd love AJ to look sensational. And then I'd love the fans to say, to almost call for that fight to take place, where we don't have a choice, because everything's about timing. And when we lost the fight in December, I thought maybe we'll never get it again. But now he's not fighting Usyk and he doesn't have a fight scheduled. But I do need to learn to say less, as George Warren keeps reminding me. But it's difficult when I do so many interviews, you know, and you say one thing and next thing it's the headline, but actually if you watch the interview, it wasn't quite like that. And I don't want to upset anyone. I think we do need to work quietly behind the scenes, subject to what happened Saturday.
Anthony Joshua came out recently and said, you know, if he's offering 70-30 to a unified heavyweight champion, undisputed cruiserweight champion, what's he going to offer me?
Yeah.
Does events of the last, let's say, 12, 18 months make the fight more difficult? Because, I mean, this would be the third time you've kind of gone down that road, at least, in the last couple of years. Is it a more difficult fight to make now than ever,
well,
or easier?
We have the material terms agreed, really, from the December fight. We wouldn't be looking... It's the same position. AJ was a challenger. Tyson Fury hasn't won since. Do you know what I mean? Oh, sorry, that he beat Chisora, but nothing changes, and I don't think anyone would be looking to change those terms. But we just needed time for the broadcast situation, you know, for a lot of things in a difficult fight like that, and also where it would be. Because I just said on TalkSport then, you know, they're trying to sort of track, you know, you want to take it to Saudi, don't you? I'm saying, no, like, let's just be real here. Everybody involved wants to take that place to the place that generates the most money for that fight. There's no point lying about it. And that goes for everybody. If they had the choice and everything was even close to being the same, everybody would choose Wembley. But that's the reason, one of the reasons that Fury Usyk didn't happen, because the pot of money at Wembley wasn't enough, really, for Fury, even at 70-30. So we have to look at timings and everything. But I think we're in a good place, like, just to revisit and say, look, here's all the emails from last time, here's the draft contract, let's work on that. But it would involve me being quiet for a couple of weeks about it, and just because I think once it breaks on social media, once it's he said, she said, and ego, and, you know, then everything changes.
Talk about new signings? Because I think this is probably go out afterwards, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't know for sure who they are. Really, why don't you fill us in?
You probably know.
I might do, but...
Yeah, so number one, Shannon Rhyme. Really good female talent, obviously been part of the Boxer and Sky Sports stable, made the move to Matchroom. Really excited about her. I mean, you've got big fights to be made, not just at domestic level, even with the likes of Maisie Rose and stuff like that, but beyond. I see her competing at world level, and she'll be boxing either May 27th or June 10th. Jack Cattrall, the undisputed 140-pound champion, which we need to move on from, really. I mean, look, everybody thinks he won that fight against Josh Taylor. Everybody thinks he should be undisputed champion, but he's not. And we need to get over that, and we need to get back to being active. And that was really what Jack wanted. You know, I sat down, he said some lovely things that made me really want to sign him. And I think we're going to move nice and quickly. He's going to be out on that May 27th card with Maurizio Lara. He'll be co-main event. We'll have a nice, solid, probably world top 15 guy, and then I want to move him into a big fight to headline himself in September, October at MEN. You know, he's obviously got a big following now. There's a lot of people behind him and supporting him, and he's always had a good fan base. So, you know, let's leave the Josh Taylor story behind and start working on his career now and getting him back for a position to challenge for the world title. And, you know, a young man that's become one of my favourites, really, is Sonny Edwards. I don't know, didn't used to dislike Sonny Edwards, but if I'm being totally honest, I just thought he was a bit of a wally. He used to say a few things, and I've learned over time that actually, one, he's actually very intelligent, great boxing brain. Two, he speaks his mind, and I think people like that. And I think he's learned a few lessons. But three, he's really, really good. And he's a British world champion, and there aren't many left. And look at the stable that we've got. Look at the fights that we can make. And we'll be looking to move Sonny Edwards straight into Julio Cesar Martinez, straight into Bam Rodriguez that fights next week. And they're massive fights. So when I watched him win the world title against Mulathane,
Mtalani,
him as well, his mate, I said, I don't know if anyone can beat him in the division. Martinez is a great fight. Bam is an exceptional fighter. So, yeah, really delighted to welcome those three to the stable.
Okay, we have to move on because I appreciate your press for time. We're ahead of the Anthony Joshua weigh-in, which is always a very busy day. Conor Benn, Eddie, what's the latest?
No latest, really. I mean, we're looking for his next fight in June. We're getting approaches every day from people wanting to fight Conor Benn. The publicised one, of course, Manny Pacquiao, which is literally every minute rather than day. Kell Brook as well. couple of big names from America, and of course the ongoing negotiations with Chris Eubank. There should be a decision next week regarding whether that fight takes place in the Middle East in June, or whether Chris Eubank, I mean, there's still no deal in place, but we are negotiating with Chris Eubank. If we don't make that fight, his next fight will be in America. And lots of interesting stuff, which you're probably about to ask me for, and comments from the British Boxing Board of Control, which are, you know, when I said the other day, wild, just quite unusual for them, and it's been quite an unusual process. And I need to try and speak to Robert Smith, and I need to speak to Conor Benn quietly and tell them not to grow up, but just, you know, can we have a balanced head here? Because if I'm Conor Benn right now, I don't believe, with what I'm seeing and reading, that I'm going to get a fair crack at the whip. And if I'm the British Boxing Board of Control, I'm reading what Conor Benn's saying, and they're pissing me off. And I think at the moment, we're a long way away, and there's going to end up being a big explosion, really, especially with some of the things that Robert said recently. So we will have to see how that plays out, but I expect Conor Benn's next fight possibly to be announced next week.
You mentioned there about the British Boxing Board of Control. I saw Conor's Instagram story recently. We said that he's happy to go in for a meeting. Is it a meeting with the British Boxing Board of Control? Does he need to see UKAD, the National Anti-Doping Panel? Does he need to have an independent hearing?
Yeah, always the board. I mean, one of the mistakes in this process, looking back, and it's not like when I've never really criticised that, other than the time that they took. I've always said it was a difficult decision for the British Boxing Board of Control. But what they probably should have done was had a hearing during this process. We had loads of time to have that hearing. Do you know what I mean? And when you look back at other instances like Dillian Whyte, the reason that was handled so well was he had a hearing to hear his case pre-fight. We had loads of time to do that. So they had the opportunity to have the hearing. Now, after the fact, they want a hearing. You know that they don't have to have Conor Benn at the hearing to have a hearing if they really want one. But of course, it would just be quite bizarre. He's also not a licence holder. So they can't suspend his licence, they can't ban him, they can't cancel him. What they could do is, which is a very, very debatable point, and one that has very complex legal issues, is summon or ban someone from being involved with a fight that he's in.
That is in the British Boxing Board of Control guidelines, though. You do have to seek permission, whether it's a promoter, a trainer, a licence holder, to go and fight there. So even if Chris Eubank Jr. were, let's say,
not a promoter, a fighter has to ask for permission to box.
A licence holder in any way, shape or form, right?
To have he will need permission to box. Every trainer or promoter will need to be licensed in the territory where the fight is taking place. For example, if I was having a fight in Texas, I'm a licensed promoter in Texas, all the trainers would go and they would have to get their license in Texas. Now, what the board could do is say to Chris Eubank Jr., for example, we will not give you permission to box, even though it's a fight in an international territory licensed by the reputable commission within that territory. It's quite unusual, to be honest with you. And there's plenty of incidents where they haven't done it before. But they could also extend that, again, very controversial, very unusual, to a trainer and restrain their trade, if you like, and say, no, actually, if you're involved with the fight. We've seen this. Someone said to me the other day, it's just like Chisora Hay. It's nothing like Chisora Hay. That was where an international commission had came into the UK to stage a fight. Do you understand? This is wherever we go, America, it will be a reputable commission that's licensing everybody involved. It's not a rogue commission. It's not in their territory. It's not in this. But it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had with Robert, because, you know, it gets to a point where, you know, right now Conor Benn is not a licence holder. I want him to fight in the UK. And to do that, we need to sit down with him. But I just need to have a chat with him to say, are you prepared to do this? Because everything I'm seeing, you know, and I know there's been a lot of media backwards and forwards, but I've never seen the board act like this. They're giving interview after interview. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but it's never been done before. We're 6 months, 7 months on from the incident, and Robert Smith's still doing interviews about Conor Benn, and it's not helping either side.
Final question for me, because I do appreciate your time here. We've spoken about it. We've spoken about it very recently, about Conor Benn and whether or not the British Boxing Board of Control or UKAD do recognise VADA. A few things to put to you with regards to that. We saw, you mentioned there, the Dillian Whyte case a few years ago with Diana Bowl. VADA was referenced as part of the UKAD statement that essentially cleared Dillian Whyte and went down the contamination route. As a licence holder, you have to comply with any World Anti-Doping accredited body, which is the UKAD.
Hearing was.
Which is what UKAD are seeking to do for any test that's been carried out by a credible outlet, which in this case is VADA.
For the hearing. So actually, if you look at the rules, which were introduced on the 1st of September,
that was passed in February 2022.
No. We have an email from the British Boxing Board saying all these rules will be in effect from the 1st of September 2022. It was actually an AGM in June, and the rules go into effect on the 1st of September.
That should have been predated the first test.
But September the 1st is when that rule changed. The first test was before that. But anyway, I don't acknowledge that VADA shouldn't be used. What my point is, Rob, is that previously, in incidents like Billy Joe Saunders, before it was even discussed about in competition, out of competition, the British Boxing Board of Control wrote to us to confirm, and the Massachusetts Commission, that they do not acknowledge VADA testing within their results. My second point is this: when I spoke to Robert Smith after the first test, we had that exact conversation. And the conversation went, I won't go into full conversation, but what are you going to do because you don't acknowledge VADA testing? We know that from before. Yes, I know. So I'm going to have to speak to UKAD and go from there. In the instance of the hearing from UKAD, Dillian Whyte used the VADA testing to show, look, I've had all these tests around it. And I think in the instance of VADA with the WBC, Conor Benn used the UKAD testing to say, I've had all these other tests around these tests that are all innocent. So how does that work? So I think they should acknowledge VADA. They don't say within those rules that you have to, it says you have to follow the rules of also those bodies and in terms of those hearings. The problem with VADA is they don't have hearings. The only hearing they had was via the WBC, of which, however way you want to put it, people say he's been cleared. He hasn't been cleared, he's been cleared. He's been reinstated in the rankings and told that he can fight for any WBC title and fight for the WBC world title.
They're a sanctioned body, not a governing body.
Sorry?
We have to wrap this up because I know you're kind of desperate to get out of it, or you've got the weigh-in to focus on. Is there not a moral side to this? Is not an ethical side of this? People are watching this, are hearing WADA, UKAD, VADA. You as a promoter, I mean,
the moral side, Rob, is I 100% believe this young man.
But doesn't that open the floodgates to potential things happening in the future with people going down this route? How do we ever take a failed test seriously?
It has been it's been taken very seriously. The fight was cancelled, and he's no longer allowed to fight in the UK. Can't say it hasn't been
circumventing that and trying to take him to a different
not
commission.
circumventing it, because he's been cleared by the testing system that tested him. He went to the people in charge of that testing and said, let's have a hearing. They had the hearing. You've seen the results. They've reinstated in the rankings. He's clear to fight.
But
it's going to be.
Can only admit him for the WBC. That's not, again, they are a sanctioning body, not a governing body.
No,
the
but
governing
all
body
those
in this instance
commissions,
is UKAD.
Rob, all of those commissions in America have the relationship with the WBC that are happy with the process that he's been through in that respect. Okay. Now, what the British Boxing Board of Control are doing at the moment is phoning round the back and trying to tell people, look, it's Conor Benn applied. Whatever you do, don't give him a licence, right? So, but what I'm saying is the commissions that we spoke to are happy with the process that Conor Benn went through with the WBC, who are in charge of that testing program, and has ultimately been found to be reinstated in the rankings and cleared essentially to box for them for their title. The commissions are, don't forget, in a lot of commissions in America, they have no testing process. So they're happy that he's been through that process of hearing. What we want to do is get him in front of the British Boxing Board of Control. I don't want him to fight internationally his whole career. I want him to fight from a UK standpoint, but also morally for me, I 100% believe this young man. If I thought he cheated, and if I knew he cheated, and I'm trying to get him to fight, I agree. Morally, I think it's a disgrace. But I don't. So as far as I'm concerned, it will be over a year around since the test. I know what he's been through. I believe he's innocent, and he's ready to fight.
Does he need to prove that to UKAD, though, with strict liability?
No, only if he wants to fight in the UK. He hasn't failed a UKAD test. He's passed every UKAD test that was put in front of him.
They do recognise VADA.
No, but UKAD don't. The board say you need to recognise VADA if there's a hearing. You need to go through that process. He's been through that process with the WBC. The UKAD, if they want to have a hearing with the British Boxing Board of Control, they can have their hearing. It doesn't have to involve Conor Benn. But you don't have to, they've got a hearing coming up with Maurizio Lara. If you don't turn up, but how do they do that for a non-licence holder? But it still comes back to the fact, I'm not looking to say, let's just avoid the board. I want him to get in front of the board. He has to fight in the UK. The value for him is not fighting internationally. But I believe he's innocent, and I believe his career should be allowed to resume. He's been through the WBC programme that were in charge of that testing process with VADA. So he's done that job. He should also go through the situation and the process with the British Boxing Board of Control. But I want everyone to have a level head, because honestly, the way the board are behaving, and they are fuming, and I do not believe in any way he will get a fair crack at the whip right now. But I want him to go through the process, but I also want his career to resume, because I believe he's innocent.
To be continued. Thanks very much for your time,
No worries,
Eddie.
mate.
Thanks very much. We'll catch up with you soon.